What is up, everybody? Shout a Buffalo Bills football podcast coming to you for the first time ever with us in the same room and
Close quarters.
We're very close. We didn't have like a really great place to film this, so we just came down and packed into my one-man studio. So you saw the movie Tommy Boy, right?
Oh, I love Tommy
that
Boy.
guy in a little coat.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
I
right.
feel like this is the two-person version of that statement.
I love that. I love anything Chris Farley. So yeah, Tommy Boy, great movie, great reference.
I don't want to touch the mic too much either because like if I put it too far, maybe it'll come out. But hey, listen, we have a lot to talk about. You know, we're getting a little bit we're trying to figure things out, so bear with us on the fly here. I didn't open up all of our little tabs because I usually don't have to worry about anybody else being in the studio with me. Shout Buffalo Bills football podcast brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets, your neighborhood store with more. Tops Fresh Burger Bar. You've heard me say this quite a bit recently, and I hope you've tried it if you're in Buffalo. I saw some people saying that, oh, I wish I had a Tops on the West Coast. Well, when you get back out to Buffalo, and there's a football season coming up, head over to Tops, and they got the Fresh Burger Bar with over 30 varieties of beef, turkey, chicken, plant-based, and gourmet blend burgers ready to grill. Tops Fresh Burger Bar has you smiling all summer long. You were at the Buffalo Zoo today. I was at practice today. You've obviously combed through all of the coverage online. What stood out to you?
You know, I'm going to start with F.A. Obata. F.A. Obata was a player that I was a little bit worried about after the Bills drafted Gregory Rousseau and Carlos Boogie Basham because there's already a lot of talent on this line, but I was really encouraged by what I heard from Leslie Frazier today when he was kind of singing Obata's praises, saying they like the versatility, the depth that he brings to this team. And no one has a better story on this team than F.A. Obata. Trafficked as a child with his sister from the Netherlands to the U.K., gets picked up by social services there, doesn't try to play professional football until the age of 22, and now he is on an NFL roster. So a player that is easy to root for and someone that I would like to see make this roster just because, like Leslie Frazier said, has the ability to play defensive end, but also kick inside to defensive tackle on passing downs.
And we actually got a chance to talk to Leslie today, and it was perfect timing because sometimes it happens like that when you're talking to coaches where something just occurred and they could talk about it fresh in their mind. And coming off the practice field yesterday, he just thought, I want to check in with FA because he's new. I want to see how things are going. We're now in the third day of training camp. How is everything? How is he getting comfortable with what they're asking him to do? And he said, Coach, listen, what's really, what I'm really excited about is I want to get pads on. I want to go out there and hit somebody. And I think that and use that power. And if watching practice today, and I kind of try to zero in on him, especially on those early morning press conferences when I'm able to get some good feedback from the coaches, I like to focus in on those players so we can kind of get an idea of take something from what they're saying to the practice field. And there was one rep in particular where Obata was just an absolute animal. I can't remember off the top of my head now who the rep was against. I got to get that up on the other side of the screen during these observation shows, but it was just an unbelievable power bull rush. And he just moved the guy. And that's the type of thing that they're talking about. This is a guy that not only can come in here and be the versatile piece, but also that, people mover. Star Lotulelei is going to be the space eater. Maybe F.E. Obata could be the people mover.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. And listen, once the pads come on, that's when the real football starts. So we have all seen our fair share of players who have looked good in the spring, who have looked good without pads on. And then all of a sudden, when the pads come on, you don't hear their name as much. They're not making the same amount of plays. So F.A. Obata sounds like he's just chomping at the bit, waiting for that opportunity. Someone to really keep your eye on tomorrow at practice if you're going to be there at the stadium. Obviously, a big opportunity for Bills fans to pack the stadium to see this team. So, good for Obata. It sounds like he's transitioning well here and really excited to see what he can do when the pads come on.
Welcome into Shout a Buffalo Bills football podcast. Thank you so much to our loyal live viewers. If you're watching on YouTube, smash that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can see Ryan over on his phone now. He's retweeting it out on Twitter. So people know that we're live and you're right, we're in the same building. I'm seeing some people saying, wait a second, they're together. We are. Ryan's going to be out at practice with me tomorrow. The duo will be covering the live practice, 35,000 tickets tomorrow.
That's wild.
It's going to be wild. It's going to be unbelievable. And I saw a clip put out from I think it was NFL Network. Kim Jones was who's been a guest on our show before. She was out of practice today, and she was talking to Sean McDermott, and she was asking him about the 35,000 fans in attendance, and you couldn't pry the smile off his face. I mean, it just being around that again. I mean, we talked about the 6,700 last year in the 2 playoff games and what that meant, but 35,000 in that stadium tomorrow. I mean, it's probably going to be shaking when they come onto the field, and it's just a training camp practice.
Yeah, it's going to be huge. And I think this is going to be a welcome to Buffalo introduction for Gregory Rousseau, someone we can talk about today because he made your observations again. Boogie Basham, the offensive lineman, and even some of these second-year players that didn't get that full experience. Like you said, yeah, there were a couple thousand fans here for playoff games, but when there's 30-some thousand people there tomorrow, it's going to be loud, and a lot of these newer players are finally going to get a good feeling of what it's like to play for Buffalo and play for this fan base. No fan base more passionate in Buffalo than, or in the NFL, I should say, than in Buffalo.
You see that?
I did.
He's back. This little fly has been living in this base. I cannot get him. Somebody said I need a bug zapper, and so maybe I'll have to get one of those little like things that will hang it up on the wall over there.
Go.
All right, so I want to get to my lead from my observations today, because I think this is really worth diving into. There's so many areas of it I want to cover here, but Cody Ford sat at the podium today, and we got a chance to really talk to him for a few minutes. And in person, these interviews in person are completely different. It's almost like we're experiencing something again for the first time. It's something that it's even better than it was before, because you take so many things for granted, and just being back in front of people, you feel the human side of this a little bit more. And so we got a chance to sit down with Cody Ford today, and it was perfect timing because I'd actually seen him make an unbelievable play on the practice field. They're easing him back in. We talked to Sean at the beginning of training camp about how they want to, be careful with a guy like Cody Ford and Zach Moss coming off of, injuries that required rehabs. They don't want him, too much too soon. And obviously the pads aren't out yet, but I've been watching to see how he's moving out there. And today I thought on multiple occasions, I thought there was quickness, there was activity. And for a guy who played right tackle for the first chunk of his, and I mean, that speed, that quickness is never going to be an issue inside him. I think that's why he could potentially be so good there if they find a home for him. But today, the big play was against Ed Oliver. And Oliver has been really strong so far in the first couple of days. He had a couple rough plays today and the brawl, which we could talk about as well, which I don't know how much of a brawl it was. It was so quick. But Ed Oliver versus Cody Ford, one-on-one, no pads. So obviously some context there, but a rep that Cody Ford won without a shadow of a doubt, was able to drive him into the turf. And the size of Cody Ford on the inside is something that I think you have to be excited about. And if that mobility is there at this stage, and again, I want to see the pads come on before I go full, because of what they want Cody Ford to be.
Yeah, and listen, from the second he was drafted, draft analysts said this is a guy that projects better at guard than tackle, but the Bills wanted to give him an opportunity there. So even the analysts said long-term, his best spot might be at guard. And the fact that the Bills have an opening there, I still feel like John Feliciano has one spot locked down, but there's still the opposite spot, and Ford is looking the part so far. High draft pick. If he keeps playing well, he will be the favorite to claim that other spot, whether it's at left guard or right guard. And it's really encouraging. And in your piece, Matt, you also talked about a coach that he worked with over during this rehab process. Why don't you tell the people at home a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, they started off the press conference talking about the struggle that he had sitting out last year. A lot of times you have a player that suffers a season-ending injury, and he's like, okay, take some time off, get back in the workout room, the rehab room, physical therapy, whatever you have to do. But the thing about it is, you don't think, especially in a season like last year where the Bills had so much success, dealing with not being a part of that was really difficult for Cody. And this is a young player that put so much in the first 2 years of his career, being very flexible with what the Bills wanted to do with him. It didn't work out at right tackle. Okay, move me inside. I'll play this side. I'll play that side. I'll play any guard spot that you want me to do. And then to have a team goal like winning the AFC East title for the first time this century and not being a part of it, it affected him. And, he had to kind of go back to the drawing board. He knew the rehab that was sitting in front of him, and he linked up with a mental health coach and somebody that, he made a good point, somebody just unbiased. A lot of times in our lives, friends or coaches, they have a the emphasis is on helping you and being there for you, and sometimes they won't tell you what you want to hear. And going to somebody where he can kind of let his feelings out a little bit, it's so timely with what's going on at the Olympics right now with Simone Biles, and obviously different situations here. But Cody said that he kind of lost his reason. You know what I mean? And his reason was, he lost his grandfather before he ever played a college football game, and his grandfather never got to watch him play. And so he always stepped foot on a football field with that in mind, wanting to, respect his grandfather's memory by how good he played and how much effort he gave. And so he spent a lot of time. He said he's found his why. He comes in with a new mentality, a new chip on his shoulder. And that's all great news, because this is a guy that, if you're talking about talent and, physical intangibles alone, this guy is, go back to the draft, this is a guy that a lot of people thought was going to go in the first round.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of mock drafts had him in late first round pick. And it's really interesting to think about, like you said, with the Olympics going on, Simone Biles, there are those mental hurdles that players go through in all sports. And it's something that I think that the fans are starting to hear a little bit more about, and they'll understand a little bit more. So good for Ford for taking that step, being able to kind of clear his head. He said that now when he gets onto those practice fields, he can put everything else going on in his life, off to the back burner, and he can focus solely on football when he's on the field. So it sounds like he's in a good place physically. It sounds like he's in a great place mentally. So really excited to see what he can do this year.
Yeah. I'm just marveling at us sitting next to each other. Somebody actually commented in the chat that it's kind of jarring seeing you guys in the same room, because it's usually split up by the thing. So that's interesting. Let's get to Greg Rousseau, because there was a couple plays today. There was one portion of practice where they were doing some one-on-ones, probably getting ready for pads to come on. I still don't know if pads are going to be on tomorrow. I'm assuming that they are. I've not covered a training camp yet where the pads didn't come on by the fourth day.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see how Sean McDermott chooses to handle that. But that's a good question, by the way. Who's on the trade block before cuts? Like Wyatt Teller. Yeah. Let's get into that. Some guys that we may in a little while, maybe some guys that could be trade fodder or trade targets for other teams on this roster, because it is a deep roster. And when you build a roster like this, it's the point of that is to be able to kind of flip some of these players that you're not going to use for draft picks. So we'll get into that in a little while. I wrote about it today. I went in today's observations piece. I told myself, I was standing next to some media guys on the sideline, and I said, I'm not writing about Greg Rousseau today, because I think sometimes we get into this habit of, somebody said you're providing too much Dane Jackson hype, and I don't want to overhype these guys, especially a raw rookie defensive end. And so, but there's things that are popping from Rousseau that I just can't ignore, and I want to make sure fans know, for a guy that I think there was a lot of question marks when the Bills drafted him, he to this point is performing so much better than I think anybody could have anticipated based on the draft stuff. And so there was two plays today. First in one-on-ones, Daryl Williams, unfortunately, was on the other end of it again. All Greg Rousseau's big moments I've noticed at this camp have been against Daryl Williams. And listen, it's a vet. It's very early in camp. When the pads come on, I would imagine that the competition gets a lot more interesting there. But it was one-on-one drills, and it was he's using this chop. And if you watch some of the video that I put out, I think it was yesterday, on the defensive linemen, you see them kind of working on those drills where the coach will hold the pad and they'll have to come in and swat it with a chop move. Well, Gregory Rousseau is paying attention in those drills, because in the one-on-one, he came in, he chopped Daryl Williams' arm down, and in so doing, and kind of an outside move to get around, Daryl Williams just face planted, just fell right to the ground in the grass. Then a couple, halfway through the practice today, 11-on-11 drill, similar type of play against Daryl Williams, where he came in and his arms are so big that I think the force that he can generate with those arms, it's like hitting somebody with a baseball bat. And so you hit him with the arm. I know a lot of people are talking about arms in the air and getting in throwing lanes. the physicality that, and he's still going to develop. I mean, that's a scary thought too. Another play where he used it and got around, probably would have been a sack. It just really impressive from Gregory Rousseau.
Yeah, and like you said, he's further along than anyone expects. And it's funny, I keep going back to what draft analysts said about some of these players when they were first selected. I remember one analyst compared him to a baby deer, saying the way he moves around, it reminded him of that. He wasn't fluid. But what we didn't see is all the training he did last season when he opted out. So he probably put a lot of work into that, in his movement, in his the speed, the pass rush moves. It's the stuff that we didn't see. And even if his movement was a little awkward on the field in his lone season at Miami, he still had 15 and a half sacks, 19 and a half tackles for loss. So he was doing something right along the way there. So the Bills might have had a diamond in the rough there, or found a diamond in the rough late in round 1 when they selected Gregory Rousseau.
Sorry, I'm laughing because somebody DM me and said, I'm cracking up at watching you guys on this video. It looks like me and a couple buddies after a night of drinking try to cram into an Uber.
That's accurate.
That's fair. Yeah. And I will say, like I said, this is a one-man studio, and I think Ryan could definitely one-man this studio. So
yes.
I'm crunched in here. We're making the best of the situation. We wanted to bring you guys a show today. Ryan's in town and we're covering it tomorrow. Hey, we might do this again tomorrow. Maybe we'll do it at the stadium. We'll see. We got to figure that out. So, all right. So Gregory Rousseau, let's get to the running backs a little bit. I think that it's worth talking about their day today. Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, Antonio Williams, Matt Breida, all of them at least had one carry where you were like, wow, they're ready to go. That's my takeaway from the running backs, is they're ready to get the pads on, because you really can't tell, what the running backs are really doing. Because a lot of times they run these 11 on 11 drills with shells on at like 70%. So the defensive line is kind of just shifting. They're not actually penetrating but today was a lot more physicality. I talked about the Effie play, talked about the Daryl Williams play with Gregory Rousseau. And there was a couple times where guys got through the line of scrimmage and followed their blocks. And that's one of the things we talked about too. So many times last year when I was going back and watching some of the film, it was a situation where guys were running into the backs of blockers. Mm-hmm. And that's something that you don't want to see this year as they try to figure out what kind of running team they were going to be. I will say the highlight running back play today for me was Antonio Williams. Unbelievable burst through the line of scrimmage. It flashed me back to the Miami performance. He's so deliberate. And I think that that's something that's going to continue to be something that makes him stand out to the coaching staff. I know that a lot of people want to, pen in Matt Breida into that spot. But I think the more I see of Antonio Williams, the more I just love what he brings to the table. It was a quick move. He ran in between a really nice block made Jack Anderson and Ryan Bates, and he just zoomed right through the hole. It was a really nice play all along. The line executed. The running back made the play. Matt Breida was involved in the running game and the passing game today. Made a couple nice plays. So across the board, Devin Singletary looks noticeably bigger too.
Yeah, he put a lot of work in this offseason in terms of gaining that muscle mass, and it showed. There were some pictures on social media that he shared, and you could see that the growth in terms of the size. All these running backs bring some specific skill. Singletary, although he doesn't have the extra gear, he can make you miss. He can step back at a moment's notice and make someone fly right by him. Zach Moss can get those yards after contact. Breida, we know for the speed, but I've been saying since the spring, don't forget about Antonio Williams. This is a running back that the Bills, it was almost kind of a running joke on Twitter to some fans last year when they would cut him, bring him back, because it did feel like we were getting to double-digit acquisitions of him being released, being brought back to the practice squad. But they liked this guy a lot. It was just a matter of, hey, we have an injury at position X. We need to sign a player at that position. We're going to bring you back. They kept him in Buffalo the entire year. He stayed in a hotel room until that roster spot would open back up. Then he was invited back. So they liked this player. In week 17, you saw why against the Miami Dolphins. I have said that I think he could be a sneaky addition and take Taiwan Jones's roster spot. Now, Taiwan Jones had some major praise a few practices ago when they called him an elite special teams player. It's not going to be easy, but Antonio Williams was the MVP of North Carolina in his final season there on special teams. So he does have some playing time in that role. I think that when you look at the overall skill set of what he could become as a running back, you don't want the potential to lose that, because with injuries in the NFL, a lot of teams burn through running backs, and it'd be good to be able to have him on that roster if an injury occurred or if they were struggling running the ball. I think that he could be a difference maker in the run game this season.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk a little bit about the secondary, but before we do, let's get some business out of the way here. Topps Friendly Markets, the official sponsor of Shout, the Buffalo Bills football podcast. Spend more time enjoying everything that summer has to offer and less time worrying about getting to the store with Topps Pickup and Delivery. Shop for your groceries online, choose pickup or delivery, and Topps will bring the groceries right to you. Visit topsmarkets.com to get started. I want to talk a little bit about Tre White and Levi Wallace today. And, a great point by our good friend Matthew Harmon, who's always live, always in the live show, always active in the comments. Hit that subscribe button. If you subscribe on YouTube, you will get a notification every time we go live, and we are live after every Bills practice, all training camp long. Also hit that like button. It helps us get this out to as many people as possible. And this is, listen, this is often imitated, but never duplicated.
That's right.
The Shout Buffalo Bills football podcast, observation practice show, not throwing any shade by any stretch of the imagination, but we were there. I was there. I'm bringing what we saw to you, and I want you guys to get the good content. All right. So Levi Wallace and Tre'Davious White today, both of them were made available to the media. We got a chance to talk to them after practice. Couple observations from just those two things, and I'll get to some stuff on the field. The maturity, this is a Dane Jackson show. I mean, I dubbed him Action Jackson for a reason. I see him make a lot of plays out there. But I tell you right now, I really left today impressed with Levi Wallace. He's always been a really mature guy. I think to do what he's done, given the circumstances he's been dealt with, you have to be a mature guy. But the football maturity and the mindset, the unflappableness to him, he never, sometimes a lot of times in a media scrum, you see the way that a guy kind of is fidgety a little bit. There's never that with him. It doesn't matter what question you're asking him, what kind of uncomfortable topic comes up. I mean, every time he goes to the podium, he's asked about the competition that he's in, probably. And I just was amazed at the way that he attacked this offseason, the way that he entered camp, and the fact that him and Dane Jackson were working out together all throughout since minicamp to now in Buffalo. Tre'Davious White was there for a few days. And I think he's done a great job learning from Tre'Davious White, and that's the football part of it. Dane Jackson and Levi Wallace at Pittsburgh and Alabama both were asked to play a lot of press coverage. And when you get to the NFL and you get in this Buffalo Bills, Sean McDermott, Leslie Frazier defense, it's a lot of zone team. They want you to play off coverage. And what Levi Wallace had to learn over the course of the last couple of years is, okay, Tre'Davious White does it probably better than anybody in the NFL right now because of how he's developed and matured. I got to study that. He's done that, but also realize from a football perspective, he can't emulate Tre'Davious White's skill set because Tre'Davious White's a 4.3, 4.4 guy in the 40. Levi Wallace doesn't have that speed. So across the board, from John Butler to Tre'Davious White to probably Josh Norman and EJ Gaines and all these other guys that, have come in while Levi Wallace has been working to get better, he's learned how to be a better off coverage cornerback. And I think that he is poised now. Dane Jackson, as good as he's been, he's got a real fight on his hands against a guy that doesn't look ready to give this job up.
Right. And, Levi Wallace even said today, I'll still go to Tre White and say, what are you seeing here? It still goes for those tips and advice. But you're right. Go back to the start of his career. Oh, it's EJ Gaines' job. Oh, it's Kevin Johnson's job. It's Josh Norman's job. And every single time Levi Wallace has come up and taken that starting job, he's not a sports car. He's a family van. He's safe. He's reliable. You can count on him. He's, like I said, he might not make the amount of plays that a Tre White makes or a top cornerback makes in this league, but he's solid. He's a quality cornerback, and I feel like some Bills fans take that for granted just because of how often he is targeted by opposing teams because of who is across the field from him. You can do a lot worse in the NFL than Levi Wallace. So He does not want to give up this job. He came back. He said this year, he said, I wanted to come back because we're going to win a Super Bowl here. So he was big on that. He didn't care so much about any other teams that were interested in his services. He's dedicated to kind of finishing the job here in Buffalo. And I wouldn't be shocked if once again he beats the odds and wins this job.
Mm-hmm. And just Tre White, play on the field, pass breakup, one-on-one coverage with Emmanuel Sanders, and those pass breakups for a guy like Tre White, who doesn't play a lot of press coverage, up in your face, man on man, is even more impressive when he's able to get into those one-on-one situations and make the plays. And it's just, it's just become routine. It's a lot of the same ways we talk about Josh Allen is, Tre'Davious White is one of the best at his position in the NFL. And, when you have that on your defense, I think it raises everybody's game. What else do you want to talk about?
Well, I actually wanted to get to that question that was in here about players that could end up getting traded. I'm going to start at the linebacker position. Leslie Frazier said today, this is the best linebacker depth that we have had since I've been here. And I think that's true. I think there's a lot of players on this roster that can make plays for this team. The Bills traditionally have 2 linebackers on the field most of the time with Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano. So they're not guys that you want to get off the field much. You have AJ Klein, though, when you're in those 3 linebacker sets. And you're going to keep a few other players along that can play special teams and can come in if there's an injury. But I think there's a few linebackers there that could end up getting traded for a day 3 pick, a Tyrell Adams, if he doesn't make this roster. I still think there's some teams that might like what a Tyrell Dodson could bring to the table, and Andre Smith from a special teams perspective. So those are just a few of many players. We've talked about Joe Giles Harris from Jacksonville. They signed him off of Jacksonville's roster. And last year he had an opportunity to play at the end of the season, and he really shined in place of, I believe, Miles Jack. So new coaching staff there, new regime brought in. He wasn't re-signed by that team. He's even a player that you might be able to get a pick for across this league. Is there a position or a specific player for you that comes to mind?
There isn't, but there's, I guess I should say I wouldn't trade him, but Mitchell Trubisky is one that I think people have brought up today, and it's an intriguing conversation because, you've seen the news out of Indianapolis, Carson Wentz going down today, and there being some uncertainty about how long he's going to be out. And I've seen a couple of people talking about the bug, so we're going to talk about him in a minute. Don't you worry, Matthew Harmon. So I think it's intriguing because how high of a return can you get for Mitchell Trubisky? And I guess the higher it goes, the more interesting it is. But the problem is you brought him in here and you didn't bring back Matt Barkley specifically because you wanted to upgrade your backup quarterback spot. Mitchell Trubisky came here for a reset year. Did he come in here for a reset 3-4 months? And I don't think that that's necessarily the case. And I think that the Bills want to, in a Super Bowl year like this, and they've been really lucky with Josh Allen that they haven't had any big injuries. But I think it would take probably a first-round pick. I don't know if a team would even be willing to give up a first-round pick, especially a team like Indianapolis who just gave up a draft capital for Carson Wentz. What was the compensation there? I
want to say third that turns into a second if he plays a certain amount, or maybe it's a second that turns into a first, actually. So they might not even have the capital, but then again, if he's injured, he wouldn't meet that criteria. Yeah, I don't see any NFL team offering a first round pick for Mitch Trubisky, no matter how desperate they may be at that position. And like you said, he was brought here for a reset year to learn the system, to play under Brian Daboll, because I think he knows that if Daboll goes somewhere in 2022, that might be where I go as well, and at least be that starter for the short term. I don't see a scenario where that happens because, like you said, he wants the reset year. The Bills wanted to upgrade the position. Yes, Matt Barkley's still out there, but then they're back to the same square one that they were at the last few years. And Barkley, when he was called upon and the Bills starters were on the field, they played fairly well. But at the same time, they felt like they needed to upgrade that for a reason. So I highly doubt anything happens there. And then one other Matt Harmon question that was brought up here, we saw before we started shooting. You were asking about the caps that the offensive linemen were playing. They're called Guardian caps. And a few years ago, before I was even with NYUpinSyracuse.com, I interviewed Mark Kelso. Mark Kelso is kind of a part of that company or was at one point in time in terms of helping them out. It helps to prevent concussions, and players can wear them at practices. So pretty smart, not just to see players that have a concussion history wearing them, but just everyone across the board having them on the offensive line to protect themselves. You don't want to lose anyone at this point of the year. You obviously can't wear them during the regular season, but smart to have them on now. It's just a preventative measure to help protect against concussions.
The Bills signed Bug Howard, tight end, and everybody in the chat wants to talk about it because tight end is just a position that I think Bills fans are just not thrilled with at the moment. And, I think Dawson, he made a catch today, by the way. I didn't write about it. It was just a catch. It was a nice ball. It was a nice catch. And Jacob Hollister's still out. He's got a back injury. He watched most of practice. And then you got Tommy Sweeney and you got Nate Decker, who's been around. And then now the Bills are adding in Bug Howard. Mm-hmm. And I don't have super high expectations for Bug Howard. I think that he's a guy that's going to come in here, probably try to compete. He's been on 3 or 4 teams already. I think I read Carolina and a few other ones. Quentin Morris had a bad drop today. So a guy that we really liked in the spring came out today. Obviously pads aren't out yet. So yeah. And somebody's commenting, not throw with the tight end position. It's one of the worst tight end groups in the league. And even if that's the case, I mean, there's some bad tight end rooms in the league, but even if that's the case and you make that argument, fine. But on an offense that's so predicated on the receiving position and with how much the targets go, I know that this is a repetitive thing. I don't know if you're going out and bringing in a tight end that, like, even look at Kansas City, look at San Francisco. They have star tight ends because in a lot of ways, because they don't have a lot of depth at wide receiver. I mean, the Chiefs have some players. They had Sammy Watkins, and obviously Tyreek Hill is one of the best receivers in the NFL. But look at San Francisco. Historically, during George Kittle's run, they haven't been very strong at receiver. And I think that in a lot of ways, that offense needs that production from the tight end position. I'd make an argument that the Bills offense doesn't need that elite production from the tight end position.
Yeah, and absolutely. And the 49ers since then have improved with yes. Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. But you're right, for a big period of time that wasn't. But let me say something. I like Bug Howard. I love Bug Howard. You want to know why?
Oh.
He watches the Shout Buffalo Football podcast. He retweeted the DeMarco episode, a segment of it. So he's a watcher. He's a viewer.
Wow.
So we're a fan of Bug Howard if he's a fan of us. No, in all seriousness, Bug Howard is actually a pretty good athlete. He's solid hands, not much of a blocking tight end, played at UNC, played with Mitch Trubisky actually at UNC. So he has a little bit of a history there, and maybe was a suggested signing from Trubisky and a few other guys that have some UNC ties, but not high expectations. I mean, I think right now, Hollister's injury, we don't know anything too specific, but I think he's expected back in the near future. I think that's fair to say. They like Dawson Knox. They like Tommy Sweeney. I think that's going to be your trio. But if Bug Howard has a good training camp and impresses in these next few weeks, with these expanded practice squads, who's to say that he's not put on that practice squad or signed to the practice squad later this year? You mentioned Nate Becker. A few years ago, Buffalo's tight end room was dropping like flies at training camp, and they had to sign Nate Becker, and he showed up. I saw the fly. He's here for the bug segment. Nate Becker was brought into training camp, and I want to say his first practice was the day I was out there covering it, and he made a few plays and he made a few catches. And I said, okay, that's pretty impressive for a guy that doesn't even know the playbook, doesn't even know anything about this team. He was just literally brought in, and sure enough, he did enough in that few week span to make their practice squad, and he's kind of been on the practice squad since then. So no, I don't think Bug Howard has any realistic expectations of making this 53-man roster, but any player that impresses in this given window of time could find themselves on the practice squad, and that's one step away from being on the main roster. So, good for Bug Howard getting this opportunity. We'll see what he does with it.
Final thought on this for me is, going into last season, the Washington football team, I think they still had Jordan Reed on their roster. I can't remember when he retired. Did he step away before COVID? I can't remember. Whatever the case may be, it was not the Jordan Reed that you remember from 5 or 6 years ago. There was nothing scary about that tight end room, right? Over the course of that season, look at what Logan Thomas turned into, and look at what he earned himself, the contract that he earned on the other end of it. We're only a few years into the Dawson Knox career arc. Okay. And listen, he might end up being just what he's been, but you can't say that for sure. And so I want to see one more season of him. Now, if they can go out and get Zach Ertz and the deal works out and you add him in the room, I have no problem with that. I think adding him in is actually interesting. And, maybe that makes sense. And maybe that some way you can figure it out to get him the ball and still kind of develop Dawson Knox, because I think that, historically speaking, they've worked in two tight ends pretty seamlessly, for the most part. But I'm not at a point where I'm jumping off a bridge if I'm a Bills fan because of the tight end room situation.
No, and you mentioned the offense goes to the wide receiver room first and foremost. Dawson Knox was not a college player that was a big part of his offense there. So he really hasn't had the opportunity. He needs these first few years to kind of get things going. Now, if he has an unproductive year this year, then yes, by all means, maybe the Bills move on in terms of finding someone that can be their tight end one in 2022. But give this kid a shot. He has the great athletic traits. He has some what you want in terms of the speed, the size, the athleticism at the position. So give it another year. Let's just see what he can do given the opportunity.
It's pizza time, my friend.
It is.
We got, what did you guys eat today so far?
Some chicken tender baskets at the zoo.
Okay. All right. Very nice. Well, we're staying in the chicken family. We're getting some wings. We're going to Marcel Louis Jacques' favorite place, all around place, I think. He likes the 9/11 wings. And I think he has a pizza place too, but he loves Macy's place pizza. And we're going there. We got 50 wings coming. We're mixing up. We got the hot honey mustard, we got barbecue, we got medium, we got hot Italian. And then we got a pizza coming as well. I'm not sure which direction they went in that. So we'll tweet pictures. It's gonna be, I think my wife, and maybe our families went to go get them. I don't know, because they said 40 minutes and we're at about 38 minutes. So
I went to get them.
That would be really exciting if we walked up there and the wings and the pizza were there. So this has been a great show, live and in person. We are going to do it again tomorrow. Maybe live and in person, maybe from separate situations. We'll see how that plays out. But thank you to Tops, our sponsor. Tops loves local. Tops is proud to partner with over 200 local growers to supply Tops with their freshest homegrown fruits and vegetables, produced, picked this morning, can be on your table tonight. For Ryan Talbot, Matt Parrino in the same studio. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care, everyone.